Today is Friday, September 8th, and we're going around the bases with our MLB insider at the New York Post, Jon Heyman. Jon, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Ryan?
I'm doing well. We're going to start off with our top story in the New York Mets. We heard all these rumors all year this year about where they would go with their president of baseball operations, and Steve Cohen's talked a lot about he's wanted a president. It feels a little incomplete without a president, and now we're seeing the rumors of David Stearns. What are you hearing about this situation? Are the Mets going to pull the trigger eventually this offseason and get David Stearns as their guy?
Well, they're absolutely talking right now. Certainly, he is the choice. I don't want to say he's the first choice because we don't even know if there's a second choice at this point. He is the choice, and they are discussing it right now, and they'd love to get him, and it does look good right now. We shall see. You never know how these negotiations could go. We've heard Houston, a former team of Stearns, is in the mix as well and interested. Not a surprise there, but the Mets are a former team of his. He did start out with the Mets. Omar Minaya did hire him for the Mets front office as an intern out of Harvard. So that's a good hire. And, he's a New Yorker from the Upper East Side, went to Columbia Prep on the Upper West Side, I believe. And, it really looks good right now for them to get Stearns. You never know how the negotiations can go, as I said, but, maybe me being a New Yorker, I'm like, why would he go to Houston? I mean, there are a couple reasons. His wife, Whitney, is from Houston. He did work for the Astros and Jim Crane. He did meet Whitney there during a party of Jim Crane's. I don't know if that's an overriding factor, but I think the Mets are the team for Stearns, and I think people around baseball believe that he will go to the Mets. He did not turn down the Mets 2 years ago. Mark Anazio, the Brewers owner, as is his right, turned down the Mets' request to talk to David Stearns. And of course, we know David Stearns took a year off after that, basically just to consult it for Milwaukee, turned down the $5.5 million that he could have made over the year and, waited it out. And now he is talking to the Mets. We know he's talking to the Astros as well, but it'll shock people around baseball if he does not come home to the Mets. Grew up a New Yorker, grew up a Mets fan. Favorite player, I learned this while doing this story, Kevin Elster, believe it or not. He liked shortstops, and Kevin Elster was his favorite player. It'll be a shock if he does not come to the Mets, and if he does not, I'm not sure where the Mets turn because they do want a president of baseball operations. As you said, we do think Billy Epler will stay as general manager, but in fact, at this point, he would be kind of an assistant to Stearns who would make all of the calls going forward.
Now, when you talk about David Stearns as the perennial hire here, it seems like just talking about his candidacy here a little bit. Are we sure that David Stearns is all that great and he's the president that you want to run your president of baseball operations? Because when I look at the Brewers, obviously they did establish themselves here in the past couple of years, but it doesn't seem like they're a perennial, contender every year, if that makes sense. It's just, I'm interested to hear about his candidacy and why he's such a legitimate candidate, and he's the guy that has to be acquired by Steve Cohen.
Yeah, I mean, he really checks all the boxes. And if we would go back to 2 years ago when they tried to get a general manager, and they tried for him and for Billy Beane and David Forst and Mike Chernoff from the Guardians, and many of them did not want to come. And of course, we never heard whether Stearns wanted to come because he didn't have that option at that time. Those were all viable candidates. At this point, this is the best candidate. It is hard to name somebody who is as good, as accomplished. Youth plays on his side. He's 38 years old. He did make the playoffs 4 straight years with the Brewers. Now, I understand they're not in a great division, but look at that payroll. That is the smallest market team in baseball, basically tied with the Reds. They vie for that annually, which is the smallest. But basically, that's market number 30. Excuse me. And he's going to be going to market number 1. He made the playoffs 4 straight years with the Brewers. Missed by 1 game last year. Obviously, we know that the Hader trade was not well received. They still had a good year, finishing 1 game out. Those players they got for Hader are actually helping them now. Contreras, the catcher, who came eventually, and some of the other players, Payamps, Gasser, look good. So Ultimately, for a small market team, it kind of worked in a way, but obviously, if anybody wants to criticize him, and he did receive a lot of criticism that time, was to take that gamble and trade
Right.
Hader. But by and large, he did terrifically well with the team. I mean, they acquired Peralta, they brought in Burns. He was left a fairly good team for a small market team. Doug Melvin, the predecessor, did a good job, left him with Craig Counsell, a very good manager, maybe the best manager. But Stearns did a fantastic job. And really, it's hard to name somebody else who really stacks up to him. I mean, it doesn't hurt that he went to Harvard, that he's from New York, that he worked for the Mets, that he was a Mets fan. He grew up in Manhattan. But the main thing is, how did he do in Milwaukee? And he did very well, considering they have the lowest, the smallest market and one of the lowest revenues in baseball. Not the lowest revenue, but one of the lowest.
Yeah, no, listen, I that's why I was just wondering, because I think a lot of Mets fans will be looking into his resume a little bit, obviously, because we've heard so much talk about him as the Mets, potential hire there. Speaking of Mets now, if let's say David Stearns is hired as the president of baseball operations, you would imagine he'd want to bring in his own manager to run the baseball team itself. Obviously, you have Buck there. Buck is from the old school notion, but it's been an up and down. Obviously, last year was a great year for Buck. This year, not so much. But when you're looking at Buck and his future with this Mets organization, how do you see it playing out if Stearns is brought in as president?
Yeah, what you say is very logical. I mean, obviously, Buck won his fourth Manager of the Year award last year. This year has not worked. I do not think it's his fault. There's been a lot of injury, a lot of underperformance. The Diaz injury killed them. Marte, I think he was hurt all year as well. He's certainly out now. They really have not performed the same way. I wouldn't blame Buck for this, but he's got 1 year to go. Obviously, that's not going to play into it for Steve Cohen or for the Mets. It's going to be up to David Stearns, presumably, if he takes the job, as we suspect that he will. Could he bring Buck back for a year? It's possible. It's possible that he could, but I understand your logic, and that's probably the prevailing opinion in baseball. At this point, we don't know exactly which direction he will go. He hasn't even taken the job yet. And the logical potential candidate could be Craig Counsell, who, like Stearns, did not take an extension offer with Milwaukee and is a free agent and is a terrific manager. Now, there are a lot of questions that come with that. Will he actually come? He may want to take a year or two off. We shall see.
It will be interesting to see how the Mets handle their manager situation. Obviously, Buck's been there for 2 years now, heading into his third year. Like you said, he has 1 year left on his deal. And if Stearns is hired, he will have that decision to make. But John, let's pivot and let's go to the Bronx. The Martian, he took over the Bronx this past week. Since he's been called up, he's been on fire, lighting it up, switch hitter, looks great from the left side. We saw him with that power. He had his first home run at Yankee Stadium. He has 3 total already. What do you make of the Martian obviously being called up? We've heard some rumors about how Steinbrenner really pushed for this call up, maybe against the wishes and wills of Brian Cashman, the GM and president. But this kid, he looks legit, and he's only 20 years old, John.
Yeah, I'm not positive exactly where Cashman stood, but I know that there was pushback in the organization, and Hal Steinbrenner ultimately made the call to bring up the 20-year-old Martian, who's doing fantastic. Good for him. Jasson Dominguez, he was great in spring training, but I know Yankee fans are going to say, why wasn't he here earlier? Well, he did hit 254 at AA, not even AAA. He did well at AAA. They made the decision age 20, not even old enough to drink. I think you have to be 21 to drink now. I don't know. It's been a while for me, okay, good. Thank you, Ryan. Anyway, I'm not going to criticize them for not bringing him up out of spring training or when he was hitting the 250s in the AA. They brought him up pretty quick, and it was the right decision, and could give Hal Steinbrenner credit. I saw that James Smythe from Yes said he's the first Yankee to go on a start with a 5-game hitting streak with all 5 games being wins. Now that was broken. We saw last night with Carlos Rodon not doing well, but you know what? It's great news for the Yankees going forward. They needed help in the outfield. They certainly need help from the left side. I hear comparisons to Mickey Mantle. I'm not going there. He is a switch hitter. He does play center field, at least for now. He is a very special talent, and it's great for the Yankees. And I think Volpe has really come along. He's been very good defensively, shown some power, has some instincts on the bases, just needs to maybe get that batting average up somehow. I do think that he was affected earlier by that launch angle and all that analytic stuff. And I think Sean Casey has probably helped him. And he's, I think, moving in the right direction there as well. So with the Volpe, with the Martian, and we'll see how Pereira and Wells do. I think people have hopes for them as well. So things are certainly looking up for the future for the Yankees. I keep hearing, well, maybe they can get back in the race. I'm not so sure about that, but for the future, things are looking much better for the Yankees right now.
Yeah, it gives Yankees fans a lot of hope, I guess, going into next year, because you do still have all of those veterans we've discussed so much. Rizzo, Stanton, LeMahieu, they'll all be back and seemingly next year. But if you have youth movement like a Wells and a Martian and a Volpe, like you can look forward to next year and have a little bit of excitement there. Jon, let's wrap all this and bring this home. The disappointing team of the week, who is it?
I got to go with the Texas Rangers. I can't believe it. I thought they had a great trade deadline. I thought they had a great team. They got Scherzer. They got Montgomery. They headed to the bullpen with Stratton and Chapman. I mean, you would think this team would have taken off, and they have gone the other way. They had a winning streak early on, now a losing streak. They are now a half game out of the playoff race. I mean, this is a team 14 games over. And by the way, for Yankee fans thinking the Yankees are going to get back in the race, this is a team 14 games over that's right now on the outside looking in. So, I'm not going to count on anything with the Yankees. But as far as the Rangers, it's been a major disappointment lately.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting again about that Rangers situation is that you're seeing guys that you thought would help them in the Scherzer and had another bad performance in a big game against the Astros this week. I mean, Adolis Garcia goes down with an injury. It's not working out all of a sudden with the Rangers. And it was crazy because I did think that they were going to be one of the best teams in the AL heading into the playoffs. And it's not working out for them at all right now. Jon, we appreciate you as always for going around the bases with us, man. Talk to you later.
All right. Great, Ryan. Good talking to you. See you later.